Hello and welcome to Archive West Texas, where we explore the people, stories, and legacies that have shaped our region, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Gordon Wilkerson, joined today by our producer, Rachel Boyd. Our guest today is Sammy Ribble, a Lubbock native whose life spans nearly a century of change in West Texas. Sammy comes from a family deeply rooted in this community. His father, O.W. Ribble, served as mayor of Lubbock, and Sammy himself has been a part of the fabric of our city for a very long time. Sammy, welcome to Archive West Texas.
Thank you, Gordon.
Tell us how your family got to Lubbock and the origins of the Ribble family story in Lubbock.
Well, it's kind of interesting, Gordon. Mom and Dad both grew up near Brownwood in Brown County. That's interesting. My father's birth certificate is from Rising Star, Texas, which has probably got a population of 100 people. But anyway, Mother had a pretty large family outside of Brownwood, and it was pretty kind of a hard scrabble environment. But she and Dad met, and they did marry. And Daddy's one of his first jobs was in Sudan, working at a bank. And that's where my sister was born. My sister is 9 years older than I am. And he worked there in Sudan for a while. And actually, he never did go to college, but he went to Drawn's Business College and finished whatever they had to offer him. And then he went to work in Lubbock as an accountant for a wholesale plumbing supply business and did that for a number of years. And I have never understood exactly, but at the time, we just had one other retail florist in Lubbock, Texas Floral. And so Daddy started the flower business, and he had no experience in it. His first location was in the Hilton Hotel, real small place. And then there was a drugstore at the hotel on the corner, and Daddy moved into that kind of at the corner, and it was much, much larger. And so just the second florist in Lubbock, and we're pretty successful. And I've often wondered, Gordon, exactly, but Daddy got involved with Rotary, and I don't remember exactly who got him into Rotary, but he was very, very active in Rotary. They had this group of officials or people that had a lot to do with Lubbock would meet in the Hilton Hotel. And they were from all over. One of the guys was Avalanche Journal, and I forget who else was there. But at the time, they sort of selected who was going to run for certain offices. And unfortunately, I never did visit with my dad specifically about this, but they decided that his business had been successful and that they wanted him to run for mayor, which he did many, many years ago, and was actually probably a pretty good mayor. Backing up a little bit, my father's father was a Church of Christ minister. He never went to college. He served small towns around West Texas and in the Panhandle for years and years. And somehow he got a certificate to teach in school. So if he would go to these small towns, he would preside at the churches, but then he would teach in the high schools. And so Granddaddy Ribble did that for years and years. In fact, his portrait is out at LCU along with the other pioneers of the Church of Christ. So it was interesting that Granddaddy Ribble, was a minister. But anyway, this group got together and they decided that they wanted Daddy to run for mayor, which is what he did.
When was that? When did he serve as mayor?
It was during the war years, Gordon, 1943 to 1945. And, Lubbock, the population was a lot smaller then. And unfortunately, I never did get to visit with my father specifically. Daddy never did take care of himself. And I lost Daddy when he was 52 years old, and I was a sophomore in tech. And I really didn't know for sure what I wanted to do, but I was sort of leaned towards, because Daddy had started this business. And so I got my degree in retailing. And I worked for my dad. But at the time, we didn't have internet, we didn't have credit cards, and so we had accounts receivable. So if Gordon Wilkerson ordered some flowers, we'd send him a statement, like you'd get one from Hip Hills or whatever else. And so Daddy had me kind of working in the office, posting to accounts, because we'd send out statements. But then when I lost my dad, we looked at a facility over on Broadway that was, it'd been a shoe store at one time, and we bought that facility, which is where we had for a number of years. Backing up a little bit, I met Judy at Tech. She was in a sorority, I was in a fraternity, and we needed some hostesses for an event. And one of my good friends' girlfriend was rooming with Judy, and they invited Judy to come, and they said, Sammy, would you go over there and escort her to this event, which I did. I hadn't met her before, didn't know her. Took her out to dinner over at the Plainsman Hotel. It was a good place at the time. And I think I asked her for a date, but she already had a date with some lousy SAE. And so I didn't. I asked her again and went out to dinner. And a good friend of mine, James Taylor, who graduated from Lubbock High the same year I did, was getting married. And they were having a reception for him at his mother's house. And his mother was just one of the nicest people I've ever been around. And they said, you can bring somebody. And so I invited Judy to come with me to that dinner at Taylor's house. And she was so impressed that I knew some nice people. But anyway, I think maybe the third or fourth date, I pretty much fell in love with her. And we married after I graduated. Judy never did finish. We'd been married for 11 months, and she got pregnant with twins. And we had the twins, David and Shelley. And our little daughter, Shelley, for whatever reason, Judy's delivery was pretty difficult. And Shelley was concerned. I don't know if it was a lack of oxygen or what it was, but anyway, she has had a mental issue. It was really difficult in the early years. And Judy was so good about making sure that Shelley got every advantage that she could. And if you ever read Judy's obituaries, you'd realize how active she was in the community, at Tech, at our church. And I think the one thing that I was most proud of her about was she was named the outstanding parent for Special Olympics in the state of Texas, not just in Lubbock. But we had a lot of issues with Shelley, but bless her little heart, she's come around and she's doing very, very well. But if you were to read Judy's obituary, I mean, she was so involved with so many things, and she was so good with Shelley, and Shelley's doing very, very well now, thank goodness, and a lot of it having to do with her mother. So that's pretty much the family, Gordon.
Absolutely. And to your point, you all were model parents with both your children, but especially Judy's work with Shelley is remarkable. For our listeners, Sammy's wife, Judy, passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah, she had some heart issues, Gordon, and she fell at home. Make a long story short, we found a place out east of Texas where Judy was. She never gained her mobility again. They worked with her and worked with her. She was at this rest home. I'll never forget. I had Shelley with me, and she was going to sleep, and told her I loved her. And she went to sleep that night and didn't wake up. So we didn't have to bring her home and go through a lot of agonizing times. So it was a blessing. Gordon, we were married for 66 years, and Shelley is handling it a lot better than I am. But anyway, that's kind of my background there.
Wonderful woman with an outstanding legacy for your family and also for our broader community. Sammy, we talked a little bit about your family's origins and how they got to Lubbock, and initially your father starting in the flower business. Tell me how you took over that business after his untimely death and how you grew it.
Well, it's kind of interesting, Gordon. I was a sophomore in Tech, and I didn't mention to my father, but he loved to go up to Colorado. he had a good friend of his that he took with him. And it's interesting, Mr. Beasley lost his son in the Second World War, but we would go camping above Pagosa Springs, and Mr. Beasley liked to fly fish. And so he took me out. I was 8 or 9, I guess, at the time, Gordon, and introduced me into fly fishing. And I don't know why, but that just really caught my attention. But back to the flower shop, when I was a sophomore in tech, I really wasn't for sure what I was going to do in the future. But I was so proud of my father and what he had accomplished that I went ahead, and after I graduated, and Judy and I got married the year that I graduated in 58, then I continued to take over the business, and it was in pretty good shape, but I felt like it could maybe do a little better. And so kind of dedicated myself, a lot having to do with the support that my father gave me during my life. And we bought a facility over on Broadway. And as a matter of fact, our friend Joe McKay helped me design what we added to it. So anyway, I continued to do that, and for whatever reason was able to arrange flowers. And but we had a very good business, had really good clientele. Judy worked in the office, and we had some people that she hired to be in sales, and had really good employees. I'll never forget, put an ad in the paper that I was looking for a designer trainee. And I'll never forget, Gordon, this is when we were still over on 19th Street. This little Hispanic lady came to me. She had not finished high school. And I was just impressed with her, and I hired her. Judy told me that I never did hire her. I actually adopted her. But she worked for me, and she developed into a really, really good designer. In fact, she's working for one of the retail florists here in town. And bless her little heart, she had 4 children. Her husband abused her. She was just really having a struggle. And it turned out that I needed some help at a holiday, and a good friend of hers went to work for me, and both of them were probably 2 of the best employees I ever had, and I keep up with both of them. I enjoyed the business. It's a very demanding business, a lot of time. And we finally sold it to someone after we'd had it for some 30 years, I guess it was.
Let's go back a little bit to your time at Lubbock High. Who were some of your favorite teachers at Lubbock High? What are some of your best memories about that school?
You know, that's interesting, Gordon. I've given that quite a bit of thought. I had some excellent teachers in Lubbock High. I remember Ms. Parker. I took accounting from her, and she was just so good. And the lady that I had in algebra, right now I can't remember her name, but I thought back about Ms. Honey. Actually, Mr. Honey's sister taught senior English, and I didn't have to take it, but I thought, well, if I'm going to college, I probably need to take another semester of English. And so I thought a lot about that, Gordon. And honest to goodness, I think the teachers that I had in Lubbock High overall, I had some good teachers at Tech, but I had some teachers that were okay. But the teachers that I had in Lubbock High were just exemplary. They really, really were. They really enabled me to have a fairly good ground to go to college. And it was just a really good environment. When I was a sophomore, the basketball team won the state championship. When I was a junior and a senior, the football team won the state championship. It was probably the glory years of Lubbock High during that time.
You were born and grew up in the midst of the Great Depression, grew up as a child in the middle of World War II. What do you remember about those 2 events?
Daddy applied, but his health wasn't good enough. You know, those years were a struggle for a lot of people. You know, those young people that decided that what they needed to do was to make sure that our country was taken care of. And it was so impressive to see those people, you know, that volunteered, those young people that learned how to fly. I think looking back, and knowing finally some of those people that were involved in the Second World War, what was more important to them was that our country would survive than maybe their own self-interest. And so there were a lot of things that I really did appreciate and see those people that were so dedicated to their country and to their families. So that's I guess what I remember a lot about.
Now, where did you go to elementary school and junior high school?
Well, that's interesting. I went to Dupree over there near Lubbock High, and then I went to Carroll Thompson. When I was at Carroll Thompson, there again had some really, really excellent teachers. One of the teachers that I had was Mule Davis, who had Camp Davis, and he was an excellent, always dressed up nice, and you had to behave yourself. I'll never forget, Mr. Davis would go out in the hall, and if somebody was acting up, he'd come and grab them and take them into the room and tell them, they couldn't be like that. They did ask me to be manager of the football team, and I did that at one time. And I sang in the choir at Carroll Thompson, and then I sang in the sophomore choir at Lubbock High. But then they asked me to be manager of the basketball team, and I couldn't do both. And so unfortunately, I wasn't able to sing in the choir anymore.
What do you remember about the community? What did you do for fun as a child?
The Arts Festival, Roy Bass started it. And unfortunately, we lost Mr. Bass, probably one of the best mayors we ever had. And he asked Alan Henry to take his place, which he did. And at the time, the Arts Festival had just gotten started. And Doug Moore, who was a CPA, helped me out in my business a time or two, and he was taking care of the business end of the Arts Festival. And he and his wife invited Judy and I to come help them put together the accounting division of the Arts Festival. That was the first Arts Festival. And so it's interesting that Judy and I got to work with Doug and his wife in the accounting section of the Arts Festival. And so I got involved with the Arts Festival after that. I was chairman of 2 or 3 divisions and been working on it quite a while. And then unfortunately, they invited myself, and I've lost the name of that lady who was just wonderful, to be co-chairman of the Arts Festival. And this was many, many years ago. And our job was to go out and get people to volunteer for the different divisions. And it was so interesting to go out and, you pick people that you knew would carry through with the job, that had an interest in the arts and in Lubbock. And you would go out and visit with these people and ask them to be chairman or co-chairman of a division. And they were more than agreeable to do that. And so it was so gratifying to know that people wanted to help the community. And the Arts Festival, was such a thriving business for so many, many years.
It's still a very good festival. Sammy, I know you've got a great love for the outdoors, and that you and your family had a cabin up in Cowles for a number of years. Tell us how that came about.
Well, actually, it was in Mora.
Okay.
Mora County. Well, I was telling you about, going camping with my father and introducing me into fly fishing. And I had always wanted to have a place in New Mexico. And it's interesting. A good friend of mine, Rex Aycock, an attorney here in town, was just the neatest guy. And Judy and Bonnie had gone around looking at a place, and Rex called me and said, "Sammy, I've got a client of mine. He's the mayor of Spur. He's getting a divorce and he's going bankrupt. And he's got this property up in New Mexico that he might want to sell." And so Judy and I went up Christmas Tree Canyon. It's north of Mora. It's on the road to Angel Fire. It's owned by a private fellow who actually was a pilot during the Second World War for the Navy. And so we went up there, and it was just a beautiful place. And we talked to a lot of people. As a matter of fact, Joe McCabe designed a cabin for me, but we were a little hesitant about just turning it over to have somebody build it. But the lady who runs the place called me one day and they said, "Sammy, we've got a cabin that's up for sale that you might be interested in." So Judy and I went over and looked at it, and it was just exactly what we wanted. And so we bought this. This was in 1959, I guess, Gordon. I'm not sure about the year. And we've added on to it two of David's good friends who were all in Scouts together that you knew, all three of them. They built a carport, and I added a deck, and then David and I built a workshop back behind it. And so while we had the place up there, I had sort of learned about woodworking from my friend Craig McDonald, but I really did enjoy it. I maybe wasn't that good, but I enjoyed doing it. But while we had the place up there, I built a lot of our headboards and some of our cabinets, and it was close to a lot of the streams in New Mexico, where not only did David and I go backpacking up in the Pecos Wilderness, but also I went fishing in a number of the streams in New Mexico. And so it was a really, really good place for us. Unfortunately, Judy's mobility was decreasing, and unfortunately we had to sell it. It was one of the hardest things I ever had to do because I love that place up there. And interesting, we got to know a lot of the locals there, that we were in the minority in that town when we'd go to dinner. And it was such a wide opening experience to be in the minority rather than in the majority when I was in Lubbock. And we met some wonderful, wonderful people. I'll never forget one of the men that I got to know real well, and he was running one of the restaurants, was the first Hispanic player that was recruited at SMU. He was a quarterback when he was in high school, but he played for SMU. In fact, he played against Tech. But to make a long story short, we met some people that we probably wouldn't have met otherwise. And I just really did love that place up there.
Beautiful place and an important part of your family heritage. You've been a longtime member at First Christian Church. Tell us about that congregation and the importance of that body in the Ribble family life.
Judy grew up in a Baptist church, big church in Houston. They didn't have a center aisle, and so we got married in a kind of a home facility in Houston. And then when we came back to Lubbock, I grew up in the Church of Christ, and Judy grew up as a Baptist. And I mean, we were happy with both of our churches, but in fact, she was pregnant with Shelley and David at the time. And so we started looking around, and Dudley Strain was a minister at First Christian at the time. But when we visited, there were a bunch of our friends that we knew very, very well that were members of First Christian Church. And so it's interesting, I'll never forget, when we decided to join the church, to go down in front, and Judy was pregnant with our twins when we joined the church. And then Judy put together, she and a good friend of hers, Shirley Sharp, she and her husband were longtime friends of ours, put together a Sunday school class for challenged individuals. And this was before the state school had started. And so they had, they had 10 or 12 individuals, boys and girls that were mentally or physically challenged, to come to Sunday school class at First Christian Church. And then they finally opened the state school, and Judy and Shirley have been credited as sort of raising a model for the state school to follow. And it's a long story, but we got to know a lot of the people at the state school. We had an association in town of individuals who had children that were challenged mentally or physically for many, many years. So we put Shelley in the state school, and at the time we knew the people, and it ended up being a really, really good environment for her. She got to be friends with a lot of people, and she sort of settled down. And so we were presidents of the Parents Association, and we always had a booth out at the fair and serving, I think it was barbecue that we were serving to raise money for the state school. And Judy was in charge of getting volunteers, and it wore her out. But it was, at the time, it was really a good environment for our family and for Shelley.
I think in Judy's obituary, it said that she never met a stranger and that she had a way of connecting with everybody. What did that look like in real life?
It's interesting. When we married, her mother and father had divorced, and Judy did move her mother to Lubbock to look after her. She had a brother and a sister. But it was just a really good environment for the church and for Judy. But anyway, to create that for people that could go to, but then, like I said, we were parents of the parents at the state school and had that barbecue, and so it was a really good environment.
When you think back to your parents and your grandparents, what values did they instill in you that you think help make you who you are?
That's interesting, Gordon. When I was in San Antonio visiting with my son, and we got to talking, David is very open to people because he has students. And he was asking me, he said, I asked him, I said, David, why are you so attuned to people of different races and different cultures? And he said, Daddy, it was your mother. And it was also your daughter. I'll never forget, Shelley was going to a school. They didn't have a PTA, and Judy couldn't handle that. And Shelley was always accompanied by this little Down syndrome, little black girl. And her parents, George and Luella Sharp, he was the principal of Dunbar. And that was his little daughter that was Down syndrome. And they got to be members of our PTA of this school that Shelley was going to. And we became the best of friends of George and Luella. We went out to eat together. We went to the fair together. And what's interesting, we became such good friends of theirs because of Shelley being attached to this little girl. And it was just, in fact, interesting, Gordon, George was the first Black person to be hired at Texas Tech in administration. When I started Tech, Black students couldn't even enroll in Tech. That was a long time ago. But then when they started having Black athletes, they hired George to look after these. He was in the Dean of Men's office to make sure that these Black athletes were taken care of. So it all harkens back to our little daughter, who doesn't see race or cultures or whatever. It's so interesting. I'm a big jazz fan. I ran into George at a jazz concert many years ago. He had lost Luella. And first thing he said to me was, Sammy, how's Shelley doing? So harking back, it's just that our little daughter, who is mentally challenged, just does not make any judgments about anybody. And that probably is carried through to her twin brother and her father.
I can see that. You and your family live that. Sammy, thank you for taking time today to share your story with us. The Ribble family is a longtime stalwarts of our community. You leave a legacy of kindness, of openness, and of service. And the broader community is much better because of you and your family's contribution. Thank you so much for taking time to share your story today. Thank you for listening. Please join us again next week for another episode of Archive West Texas.